Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are glad you are here because today we are stepping into a world that is equal parts chaotic, deeply intellectual, and honestly kind of exhausting just to think about.
Oh, absolutely exhausting.
Yeah, we are talking about David Chang.
It is a massive topic, and it's one of those subjects where, everyone thinks they know the story, but usually they really only know the headlines.
Right. If you are listening to this, you probably know the greatest hits. You know him as the Momofuku guy.
Yeah.
Maybe you have eaten a pork bun that changed your life.
Mhm.
Or maybe you just know him as that loud, highly opinionated chef on Netflix who wanders around the world and insults people's pizza preferences.
The whole celebrity chef persona.
Exactly.
It is a very strong brand.
It is. But today's mission is to blow past that branding. We want to figure out how a competitive golfer who turned into a religious studies major of all things ended up becoming one of the most influential voices in modern food culture.
Right.
And we aren't just going to talk about how to make dashi.
No, definitely not. If we just look at the recipes, we are missing the point entirely. We are looking at a career defined by a very specific and surprisingly ancient philosophical concept.
This is the part that blew my mind.
Yeah, it is called via negativa.
Via negativa. I mean, it sounds like it spells from Harry Potter, but it is actually theology.
It is. It's this idea of finding the truth by stripping away what isn't true. It is all about elimination.
Right.
And when you look at Chang's career through that lens, from the kitchen to the boardroom to the live TV studio, you really start to understand that his success isn't about what he added. It is about what he took away.
That is a wild way to look at a chef, considering we usually think of chefs as people who, add ingredients, build things up.
Exactly.
But we are going to get into all of that. We have a stack of sources today that is, frankly, all over the place, which is fitting for the subject.
Very fitting.
We have got deep biographical details, some incredibly dense philosophical interviews he did with PBS for American Masters.
Those were fascinating.
Yeah, they really were. And then we have industry analysis on streaming technology from AVXA.
Which gets surprisingly technical.
It really does. And then we have recent updates from his own media network, taking us right up to this month, February 2026.
So it's a mix of highbrow philosophy, lowbrow humor, and the gritty reality of the restaurant business.
Which is exactly where Chang lives. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's dive in.
I want to start with the origin story because it really doesn't fit the mold. You hear celebrity chef, and you think of someone who grew up at their grandmother's knee.
Stirring the pot.
Yeah, dreaming of opening a little bistro in the neighborhood.
That is definitely not David Chang.
Not even close. He was born in 1977 in Arlington, Virginia.
Northern Virginia, deep in the suburbs.
Right, to Korean immigrant parents. And the family history there is heavy. His father, Joseph, was from Pyongyang, and his mother, Sherry, was from Kisong. They emigrated in the 1960s.
And that geography is really important to understand. How so?
We are talking about a family history rooted in what is now North Korea. There is a specific trauma and a profound resilience built into that migration story, and that hangs over the household.
Absolutely. But growing up, David Chang wasn't channeling that history into cooking. He wasn't the kid bringing weird lunches to school and being proud of it. He was actually trying to hide it.
He was trying to assimilate. Hard.
And his vehicle for that wasn't food, it was golf.
Golf. The ultimate suburban establishment sport.
He was a serious competitive golfer. Junior tournaments, the whole 9 yards. And if you know anything about junior golf, it is a psychological pressure cooker.
Oh, it is an incredibly lonely sport. It's just you, the ball, and your mistakes.
Right.
And Chang has talked about this intensity. He wasn't just playing for fun with his friends. He was playing to win, and he was really playing for his father's approval.
That makes sense.
That competitive streak, that ability to just grind, it starts on the fairway. It does not start on the kitchen line. But he burns out on golf, or at least he realizes he is not going to be Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
So he goes to college, Trinity College.
Yeah.
And this is the part that made me do a double take. He didn't study business. He didn't study hospitality. He majored in religious studies.
Which feels like such a massive left turn.
It does. You picture this angry, loud chef, and then you find out he spent 4 years reading ancient texts.
But you were saying this isn't just a random degree he picked to graduate.
No, it is actually foundational to who he becomes.
Yeah.
Now, we have to be clear. He admits he wasn't a great student.
Right.
He says he was getting C+s. He was definitely not on the dean's list. But the material stuck with him. He was deeply influenced by Mahayana Buddhism.
Okay, break that down for us. What part of Buddhism resonates with a C-plus student who eventually opens a noodle bar?
It is specifically the concept of the bodhisattva.
The Bodhisattva.
Right. So in this tradition, a bodhisattva is an enlightened being who is fully capable of entering nirvana.
Like total bliss. The end of suffering. Exactly. But they choose not to. They actively delay their own salvation specifically to stay behind in this messy, painful world to help others achieve enlightenment.
That is surprisingly noble.
It is profound. It's all about compassion. It is about saying, I will suffer so you don't have to. And Chang cites this as a major influence on his thinking.
Even though he grew up Christian, right?
Yeah, he grew up in a religious Christian household, went to Catholic school, but he found this complexity in Eastern philosophy that just made sense to him.
So you have this idea of service planted in his head early on. Service not as a servant, but as a sacrifice.
Exactly. That is a great way to put it.
But he graduates, and he doesn't become a monk. And he doesn't become a chef yet, either. He essentially runs away.
He runs away to find himself.
Yeah.
Which is a very generic 20-something thing to do.
We have all been there.
Right. But he did it with a lot of intensity.
He goes to Japan to teach English.
Yeah.
Then he comes back. He tries to be a normal person. He gets a job working in finance in New York City.
The classic desk job.
And the way he describes this is hilarious. He hated the absurdity of it.
He lost it.
He is sitting there collating papers, moving numbers around on a screen, and he just felt like it was all fake.
He couldn't stand the lack of tangible results. In finance, you move money, but you don't actually make anything with your hands.
So he quits. And this is where the pivot happens. He didn't start cooking because he had a burning passion for gastronomy.
Oh.
Or because he loved the smell of fresh basil. He became a cook because it felt like honest work.
It was about the hard labor. He wanted to do something where you could see the result of your effort immediately. You chop the onion is chopped.
Done.
Done.
He wanted to live on the periphery. He wanted to basically opt out of the normal society that he felt he had failed at.
And this is where we really have to bring that via negativa concept back in, because it explains this entire period of his early 20s.
Okay, let's dig into that. You mentioned it earlier, via negativa.
So, broadly speaking, via negativa is an approach to theology, specifically apophatic theology. It is the idea that God is so vast and so complex that human language literally cannot describe what God is.
The words just fail.
Exactly. So the only way to get closer to the truth of God is to describe what God is not.
Like a process of elimination.
Think of it like a sculptor with a giant block of marble. The sculptor doesn't add the statue to the block. The statue is already inside.
Right.
The sculptor reveals it by chipping away everything that isn't the statue.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
So Chang applied this to his own existence. He didn't know who he was. He didn't have a passion driving him forward, but he knew what he wasn't.
He wasn't a banker.
He wasn't a golfer.
He wasn't a desk jockey.
Exactly. He kept eliminating the things he hated until the only thing left was the kitchen.
That is a remarkably philosophical way to end up scrubbing pots for minimum wage.
It is. But it explains his intensity. He wasn't just cooking for a paycheck. He was cooking because he had eliminated every other option in his life. It was the only truth he had left.
So he commits. He goes to the French Culinary Institute. He works at some incredibly heavy-hitter places.
Places like Café Boulou.
Right. He learns the extreme discipline of high-end kitchens. But then, in 2004, he decides to chip away another layer. He strikes out on his own. He opens Momofuku Noodle Bar.
In the East Village.
And we really have to stop and set the scene here, because looking back from 2026, it is really hard to remember what 2004 was actually like.
It was a completely different universe.
If you wanted good food in New York in 2004, where were you going?
You were going to a place with white tablecloths.
Yeah.
You were going to Le Bernardin or Daniel.
You were dropping some serious money.
You were paying hundreds of dollars. You were putting on a jacket. And you were engaging in this very rigid European ritual of dining.
And if you wanted cheap food.
You got a slice of pizza or a dirty water hot dog.
Yes.
There was very little middle ground where the technique was high-end, but the environment was low-end.
And certainly there was no ramen.
Not real ramen. I mean, you had the instant stuff in college dorm rooms. But the idea of ramen as a craft dish, that just didn't exist in the American culinary consciousness.
So he opens this tiny, uncomfortable wooden box of a restaurant.
And he calls it Momofuku.
Which means Lucky Peach.
It does, but it's also a double entendre. It sounds like a curse word to English speakers.
which he definitely knew.
Oh, he 100% knew. And it's also a direct homage to Momofuku Wando, the inventor of instant noodles.
I love that. It is high-low right from the jump. He is honoring the inventor of literally the cheapest food on earth while serving a hyper-focused high-end version of it.
Exactly. But the way he ran the place, this is via negativa in action again, he stripped away everything that wasn't the food.
The service elements.
Right. He looked at fine dining and said, I hate the tablecloths. Gone. I hate the reservations. Gone. I hate the obsequious waiters. Gone.
This is where the whole bad boy reputation starts.
Mm-hmm.
Epicurus actually called him the bad boy of the culinary world, specifically because he wouldn't let people book a table.
Which seems completely normal now. Half the restaurants in the city are walk-in only. But back then, it was seen as incredibly arrogant. People were saying, who does this kid think he is, making us wait in line in the cold?
And he refused to offer vegetarian options.
Who's militant about it?
It wasn't just a preference. He felt that modifying his pork broth compromised the integrity of the dish.
Right. It wasn't just him saying, I don't like vegetables. It was him saying, this is the art. Take it or leave it.
And that friction, that willingness to say no to the customer, that was revolutionary. It completely shifted the power dynamic in the dining room. Suddenly, the chef was the auteur, and the customer was just lucky to be allowed in the building.
Exactly. And he wasn't afraid to pick fights with the establishment either. There is that famous moment in 2009.
Which feels like ancient history now.
It really does. But he is talking to Anthony Bourdain, and he just unloads on California cuisine.
The fig on a plate comment.
Yes.
He said California chefs don't manipulate food, they just put figs on a plate.
And people were furious. Because at the time, Alice Waters and that whole farm-to-table movement in Berkeley, they were the absolute gods of food.
They could do no wrong.
Right. They believed the chef's job was to step back and let the pristine ingredients shine.
And Chang is basically saying, no, that's lazy.
He is saying that's not cooking. He is defining his own style by rejecting the dominant style of the West Coast. He's saying, we cook, we transform, we ferment, we change the molecular structure of the thing to make it delicious.
It's via negativa again, defining himself by what he fights against.
Exactly.
And clearly the fight paid off, because the empire just exploded after that. You had Sembar, which basically introduced the world to the pork bun.
Which is funny because he almost didn't even put them on the menu. He thought they were just a throwaway staff snack.
Wow. And then Momofuku Ko, this was the crown jewel.
12 seats, online-only reservations.
The panic of trying to get those reservations.
Oh, it was a bloodbath. You had to click a button at exactly 10 a.m. or you didn't eat for a month, but it got 2 Michelin stars. It was the absolute peak of that exclusive counter dining trend.
And let's not forget Milk Bar.
Founded with Christina Tosi.
He hired her to run the pastry program, and they created this whole new category of desserts.
Crack pie.
Cereal milk soft serve.
It was nostalgia weaponized.
It was sugar addiction as high art.
So he builds this massive thing. He expands to Sydney, to Toronto with that crazy glass cube building, Las Vegas. He is on top of the world. But, and here is where the story takes a turn that I think a lot of people missed while it was happening.
Yeah.
If you look at the timeline closely, the restaurant empire actually starts to shrink.
It contracts significantly.
Between 2020 and 2023, the unthinkable happens. He starts closing the icons. Momofuku Seibo in Sydney, gone.
Sembar moved and then closed.
And then, in November 2023, the flagship itself, Momofuku, he closed it. That was a shockwave through the industry, closing a 2-star Michelin restaurant that is still packed every single night. That just doesn't happen.
So why did he do it?
I really think it is the ultimate act of via negativa. He realized that the restaurant model, the physical brick and mortar, the razor-thin margins, the endless grinding personnel issues, it just wasn't the truth for him anymore.
He was dripping it away.
He was dismantling the physical empire to build a digital one. He realized he could reach more people and honestly influence more palates through a screen than he ever could through a dining room.
Which brings us to the next massive phase of his career, the media mogul. But before we get to the cameras and the streaming tech, I want to pause on the philosophy.
Okay.
Because as he moved out of the kitchen, he started talking a lot more about what food actually means.
And this is where he gets really interesting and, frankly, a little controversial.
In that PBS American Masters interview, he talks extensively about American food. And he has a very specific, very non-traditional definition of it.
He does. And to understand it, you have to understand that Chang absolutely hates labels.
He hates being boxed in.
If you call his food Korean, he gets annoyed. If you call it Asian fusion, he rolls his eyes. He calls his food American.
But wait, how does a guy serving dashi and kimchi and pork buns claim he is serving American food? To the average person, that sounds like a stretch.
It sounds like a stretch until you hear his actual argument. He argues that America is, by definition, a nation of immigrants. It is a melting pot. Therefore, the only food that is truly American is immigrant food.
So the hot dog.
German immigrant
Or
food.
European immigrant food.
Joe, he is saying that dashi and kimchi are just the next wave of their exact same story.
Exactly. He argues that American food is defined by evolution. It is not a static thing. It is what happens when people from different places are forced to live together and trade ingredients.
He has a really interesting point about the American South, too, doesn't he? Yes. He argues that the only true original American cuisine, the actual bedrock of our food culture, is from the South. And specifically, it is the food of enslaved people from Africa.
That is a heavy but historically very accurate take.
It is. He says that is the true foundation. Everything else is just layers of immigration on top of that. So when he looks at something like Chinese food in New York, he doesn't see it as foreign. He sees it as American history happening in real time.
He traces that evolution, right, from the Canton-style food in Chinatown,
Which was heavily adapted for American palates, sweeter, gloopier sauces.
to the explosion of Sichuan food in the East Village later on.
Which was much spicier, much more authentic to the source material. He says that shift from General Tso's chicken to authentic mapo tofu, that is the American story. It is the story of a culture gaining confidence and finding its identity in a new place.
And he applies this American label to everything, even the stuff we traditionally think of as trash. I was laughing so hard reading about his defense of Domino's Pizza.
Oh, he unapologetically loves Domino's.
Yeah. This is a Michelin star chef. How can he sit there and defend industrial chain pizza?
It goes right back to his intense dislike of culinary snobbery. He basically argues, look, if you grew up in Northern Virginia and your core happy memory is eating Domino's with your friends after a game, who is he to tell you that your taste is wrong?
Deliciousness is universal.
That is his core belief. He thinks there is an objective yummy factor that entirely transcends culture. He actually has this theory he calls the ham belt.
The ham belt. Please explain this to us.
It is brilliant. He points out that if you look at a map of the world, there is a specific latitude band belt that goes all the way around the globe. And in that belt, almost every single culture cures pork.
Okay, I'm tracking.
You have prosciutto in Parma, Italy.
Right.
You have Genoa ham in China. You have country ham in Smithfield, Virginia.
And jamón in Spain.
Exactly. He says, look, these people didn't talk to each other 500 years ago. They didn't have Zoom. They weren't sharing recipes. But they all independently figured out that salting and drying a pig leg tastes incredible.
So he is saying that our palates are wired the exact same way, regardless of our politics or our borders.
Yes. He uses that to argue that we are more alike than we are different. If you strip away the borders via negativa style, you find that we all just want salty, cured pork. Our palates are the great unifier.
That is a surprisingly optimistic view of humanity, coming from a guy who is known for being a bit of a curmudgeon.
He is a romantic cynic.
I like that. So he has this grand philosophy. He has the American food identity locked in.
Yeah.
And he has very few physical restaurants left. So he turns his attention entirely to media.
And this wasn't an overnight jump. He didn't just wake up one day and decide to be a TV star. It started with print.
Lucky Peach.
God, I really miss Lucky Peach.
For the listener who maybe missed this era, tell them what Lucky Peach was.
It was a food magazine, technically speaking. It ran from 2011 to 2017, but it was published by McSweeney's, which is a literary house.
Right.
So it wasn't, here is a recipe for a quick 30-minute weeknight casserole. It was deep essays on the history of ramen. It was full graphic novels about getting drunk in Tokyo. It was dense, it was artistic, and it was wonderfully weird.
It felt like a punk rock scene for food nerds.
It established his voice perfectly. It showed the industry that he could curate content, not just menus, and that naturally led to the Netflix era.
Shows like Ugly Delicious.
Which was basically Lucky Peach translated for television, breaking down cultural barriers by traveling around and eating pizza and tacos.
Or breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
But the real innovation, and this is where we need to get a little technical based on our sources, is what he is doing right now. The live streaming.
This is where he completely changes the game again.
So enter Dinner Time Live with David Chang.
It launched on Netflix. And we really need to understand the streaming landscape here. Netflix had never really done live programming effectively before this. They dabbled with a live comedy special or two, maybe a reunion show, but a recurring live show with multiple moving parts. This was entirely new tech for them.
And most cooking shows are the exact opposite of live. They're arguably the most heavily edited things on television.
It is an industry term called dump and stir.
Dumped and stir.
Yeah. The turkey goes in the oven raw, they yell cut. The host immediately pulls out a perfectly browned turkey that a professional food stylist spent 3 hours painting with shoe polish and blowtorches.
It is a magic trick. It's not cooking.
Chang calls it a lie. He flat out says 99% of cooking on TV is a lie. He wanted to show the 1% that is real.
So the premise of Dinner Time Live is simple, but terrifying. He cooks a meal for celebrity guests. Live. No edits, no stopping the tape.
And according to that AVEX XA analysis we read, the technical lift to make this happen was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. Let's get into the weeds on this. Because he didn't just walk onto a pre-existing soundstage on the Sony lot. He had to physically build the thing.
He took a massive personal risk. He wasn't even sure Netflix would buy the concept, so he spent his own money. He rented a warehouse in Los Angeles and built a custom studio kitchen.
And he didn't even use professional restaurant equipment.
No, and this is a crucial detail. He used residential LG appliances, the exact same stuff you would buy at a Best Buy.
Why? Was that just a lucrative sponsorship thing?
I mean, eventually, yes, it became branded, but initially it was strictly about the philosophy. He wanted to prove to the viewer that you could cook great food with the same tools the audience had in their own homes. He wanted to remove the excuse of, well, of course his food is good. He has a $20,000 commercial blast chiller.
But the risk of cooking live on residential gear, I mean, if the oven is slow to heat up because it's a basic model, you are dead in the water.
There is zero fix-it in post. And the pitch story for this show is legendary.
Yeah.
He didn't just walk into a boardroom and show Netflix executives a PowerPoint presentation.
Bro.
He invited the top Netflix executives to a dinner party actually inside the studio he built.
Wait, he cooked for them live as the pitch.
He cooked for them while the cameras were rolling, and he projected the live feed onto massive screens in the room so they could see exactly what the show would look and feel like.
That is a flex.
He showed them the chaos, he showed them the smoke filling the room, he showed them the reality of a live kitchen, and they bought it.
The AVXA article had this quote from him that really stuck with me. He said, "Keeping time is by far the hardest thing."
Think about it. In a normal restaurant kitchen, the food is ready when it is ready. The waiter stalls the table. In a tape show, you just edit around the waiting.
Right.
But in a live television show, you have exactly 58 minutes before the feed cuts black. If the chicken isn't done at minute 55, you have a disaster on your hands.
We have to improvise on the spot.
You have to be a real chef, not just an actor reading a recipe. That is the fundamental distinction. If you are just a presenter, you panic. If you are a hardened line cook who has survived a Friday night rush in New York City, you pivot.
You slice the chicken thinner so it cooks faster.
You sear it harder. You turn the mistake into a feature of the dish.
It forces total honesty.
It does. If he burns the sauce, millions of people see him burn the sauce. There is nowhere to hide. It is the ultimate via negativa, stripping away the safety net of editing to show the raw truth of the process.
And season 3, which we just watched, this aired late 2025, it really leaned into this communal, chaotic aspect.
They brought in Chris Ying,
who is his old editor at Lucky Peach.
Right. And Chris acts as the voice of the internet on the show. He is standing there off to the side with an iPad, reading questions from the live chat in real time.
So you have Chang trying to saute spinach, hold a conversation with a celebrity guest like Joe Manganiello, and simultaneously answer a highly specific question from user 456 about why he isn't using fresh garlic.
It is total chaos. But it is controlled chaos, and it genuinely makes the viewer feel like they are standing in the kitchen with them, not just passively watching a polished performance.
So that brings us right up to the present moment. It is February 2026. David Chang has transitioned from the king of noodles to the king of content. What is he actually obsessed with right now?
Well, if you check his current output on the Dave Chang Show podcast feed, he is deep in the weeds of culinary debate. Just this month, he had Bill Simmons on the show.
The sports guy.
Yeah, and they spent an entire hour aggressively debating dry-aged versus wet-aged steak.
Let me guess. Chang has a contrarian opinion on this.
Of course he does. He thinks the entire industry obsession with dry aging is massively overblown. He thinks people just like the funky taste because they have been told it is expensive.
Typical Chang. And I saw he recently made a big prediction about the next trend ingredient.
Dried squid.
Dried squid.
Really? He is convinced it is the new kale. He thinks it is going to cross over from niche Asian grocery stores to mainstream places like Whole Foods.
I mean, part of me wants to laugh, but he was right about pork buns. He was right about sriracha way before everyone else caught on.
I definitely wouldn't bet against the squid.
But, it hasn't all been smooth sailing and victory laps for him lately. We have to talk about the chili crunch situation.
Yeah, we absolutely cannot tell the David Chang story without including that chapter. 2024. It was a very rough year for the Momofuku brand.
Set the stage for us. For the listener who maybe missed this drama, what exactly happened?
So, Momofuku sells a packaged, jarred condiment called Chili Crunch. It is delicious. It is a spicy, crispy chili oil.
Basically, their branded version of a very traditional, centuries-old Chinese condiment.
Right. But in 2024, Momofuku's legal team sent formal cease and desist letters to several other small companies, many of which were tiny startups run by Asian American founders.
Oh, wow.
And they sent these letters because those companies were using the terms Chili Crunch or Chili Crisp on their labels.
Momofuku was trying to trademark the name.
Yes, and they were trying to enforce it very aggressively.
And the public optics of this were just terrible.
Catastrophic. Think about it. Here is David Chang, the guy who constantly champions the little guy, the guy who built his entire philosophy on the idea that American food is immigrant food.
Right.
And suddenly, his massive corporate entity is sending lawyers to bully small immigrant businesses over a totally generic culinary term.
The community must have turned on him.
Incredibly fast. They labeled him a trademark bully. They said he was using corporate power to try and own a piece of culture that simply didn't belong to him.
It feels like the exact moment where the bad boy rebel realized he had accidentally become the man.
Exactly. You cannot be the punk rock outsider and the litigious corporate CEO at the same time. The friction is too high.
So what did he do? Did he fight it?
This is where the story gets interesting again, because of how he handled it. He didn't double down with more lawyers. He didn't put out a sanitized PR statement and hide. He went directly on his podcast.
The apology episode.
He issued a full, unvarnished public apology. And he sounded genuinely shaken by the backlash. Momofuku officially announced they would no longer enforce the trademark. They effectively backed off and gave the term back to the community.
He just admitted he was wrong?
He admitted they screwed up completely. He said they were just operating as a business trying to protect a product, and they were totally blind to the cultural damage they were doing.
It feels like another iteration for him. Another live edit.
It connects right back to that core philosophy he talks about regarding creativity. He always says, don't edit your idea in your head.
Broke that down a little more.
Chang believes that if you sit around trying to make something absolutely perfect before you release it to the world, you will kill the idea. You have to put it out there. You have to let it be messy. You have to actually make the mistake in the real world so you can learn from it.
You can't theorize perfection. You have to encounter reality.
No, you have to physically fail. The Chili Crunch disaster was a massive public failure. But because he operates on this highly iterative model, he was able to absorb the blow, pivot, apologize, and correct course.
Which is the exact same reason he likes doing live TV.
Yes. He actively wants to see the failure. He wants to know exactly where the weak points are so he can fix them on the fly. If you edit the TV show, you hide the weak points from yourself, and you never actually get any better.
That is a deeply terrifying way to live your life. Constantly, actively seeking out the failure point.
It is exhausting. But he doesn't view it as failure. He views it as the only real path to mastery.
Speaking of mastery, he has a very complicated relationship with that word, too.
The shokunin.
Right, the Japanese concept of the absolute artisan. The master who spends 50 straight years perfecting one single task. Like Jiro dreaming of sushi.
Right. Chang deeply reveres that concept. But he completely rejects the title for himself.
He doesn't think he is a master, even after all the Michelin stars.
He explicitly told PBS, I don't view myself as a master. He defines mastery in a completely different way than we usually do. He says mastery is simply not giving up.
That sounds like something a high school football coach says in a locker room.
It is a very blue-collar approach to art. He says it is not about innate talent. It is not about some God-given genius palate. It is just about resilience.
Endurance.
It is about getting knocked down, getting the terrible review, burning the sauce on live television, getting sued over chili oil, and then waking up and showing up the next day to do the work again.
It is the bodhisattva concept coming full circle, staying in the suffering to do the work.
Exactly.
And this naturally influences how he leads his teams now, too. He talks a lot about integrity in the kitchen,
Doing the right thing when no one is watching.
which is a huge structural shift from the old-school French brigade system that he came up in,
The classic Escoffier system.
where you did the right thing strictly because you were terrified the head chef would throw a hot pan at your head.
Right. Chang grew up in that brutal system. He was screamed at, he was abused emotionally, and early in his career, he fully perpetuated that. He was a notorious screamer.
He admits that pretty freely.
He is very open about his deep regrets there. But his evolution over the last decade has been moving away from leading by sheer fear to leading by personal integrity. He is trying to build a restaurant culture where the line cook chops the chives perfectly, not because they are scared of getting yelled at, but because they actually care about the chive.
Which brings us back once again to Via Negativa. He is trying to strip away the fear, strip away the ego.
To get to the pure truth of the work.
So when we finally zoom out and look at this entire arc, it is pretty staggering. We have the kid in Virginia, deeply ashamed of his smelly Korean lunches, hiding out in the suburban golf clubhouse.
Trying to be anyone else.
And now, that exact same kid is a global icon. He has created a massive media empire where that exact same food, the kimchi, the intense fermented smells, is celebrated live, completely unfiltered in front of millions of people.
It is a complete inversion of his childhood trauma. He took the very thing he was most ashamed of and made it the absolute center of the culture.
I think he represents a massive shift in how we look at experts in general, too.
How so?
Well, think about someone like Julia Child or Martha Stewart.
The great domestic goddesses.
Right. They were perfect. They were practically untouchable. They taught us the one correct way to do things. They were the ultimate authority.
And if you messed up the recipe, you failed.
Exactly. But Chang is the new model of expertise. We don't want the perfect, polished expert anymore. We want the expert who struggles.
We want the guy who swears when he burns his finger on a hot pan.
We want the guy who openly admits he doesn't know everything, but is willing to figure it out in front of us.
We want the messy process, not just the pristine product.
We want the truth.
And that is exactly what he delivers. It is messy, it is loud, it is sometimes completely contradictory, but it always feels intensely real.
That is a really powerful place to land. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to mull over as we wrap up. Chang has bet his entire career, his entire philosophy, on the idea that deliciousness is universal. He firmly believes that a perfectly made pork fun will always win out over racism or borders or political division.
It is a very, very optimistic bet for a cynic to make.
It is. But in a world that feels increasingly divided, where we are constantly told to retreat and stick to our own tribes, it raises a really interesting question for all of us. Is your palate actually the most honest diplomat you have?
That is a great point. Can you really hate someone if you genuinely love their food?
Exactly. Maybe the stomach is actually smarter than the brain.
That is definitely something to chew on.
Literally. Well, thanks for listening to this deep dive into the chaotic, brilliant world of David Chang. We will catch you on the next one.
See you then.